Welcome to the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Podcast. My name is Nathalie Niddam. I'm a nutritionist, a human potential and epigenetic coach, and I created this podcast to bring you the latest ways to take control of your health and longevity. We cover it all, from new technology to ancestral health practices, personalized interventions, and a very special interest of mine, peptides. Enjoy the show. In this episode, I got to interview Dr. William Seeds, a virtual legend in the world of peptides. Dr. Seeds is an orthopedic surgeon. He's got a very busy practice in Ohio, and he also practices in Beverly Hills in California a couple of days a week. And in his spare time, of which he must have some, I don't know where he finds it, he also has taken it upon himself to educate other practitioners and medical professionals on the use of peptides in practice. So, in this episode, we talk about a variety of things. We kick it off with talking about a very special event that he is taking part in and actually joining forces with on November 14th. It's called Light the Night, and it's a fundraiser for cancer research, but really interesting and different cancer research, because this cancer research actually focuses on 4 peptides that are being researched to solve certain types of cancer. I believe it's leukemia and lymphoma. So anyway, I will put the URL for that event down below, because what's also really interesting about this event is that on November 14th, it'll be live online, and Dr. Seeds and about 10 of his fellows are going to be offering educational sessions on using peptides for optimizing your health. So, and it's free. Now, when you go to the URL, you can, of course, choose to support the foundation and the cancer research of this whole cause, but you don't have to. You can attend for free. It's open to everybody. So that URL will be down below. Once we're done talking about that, we went on to talk about cellular senescence and a great peptide called SELANK. The plan originally was to talk about a couple of peptides, but as you will see, we ended up going a little long because we went a bit deeper into a bunch of stuff than we might have intended. So we saved the other peptides for another day. But in the meantime, we talk about SELANK. I know I learned a few things about SELANK that I didn't know before, so hopefully you do too. Remember that if you enjoy this podcast and you want me to be able to keep bringing you lots and lots of episodes, please, please, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Leave us a review. It really helps the podcast to be seen. All right. Thanks so much and enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Dr. Seeds.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Nathalie. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So I'm at the point where I don't think Dr. Seeds actually needs an introduction anymore, but just in case anybody's just like flew in from Mars, Dr. Seeds is, well, one of the leading doctors, or if not the leading doctors in the space of regenerative and medicine, really around peptides. And for me, I'm always made like Dr. Seeds is a practicing orthopedic surgeon and also has a hand in this whole regenerative space at the same time, while also having taken on the mission of shaping really the next generation of physicians who will also be working with peptides in the future and really working from this place of cellular medicine. And did I get any of that right, Dr. Seeds? Am I kind of sort of on the right track here?
Oh, absolutely. You've kind of put a bunch of things together that are absolutely right. And, you know, my focus is on cellular medicine, and my background is the molecular pathways that have everything to do with cell efficiency, metabolic flexibility, and cellular senescence. And it's been that work over the last 35 years that has really been my launching pad for just a different viewpoint of how I look at medicine and where it is today, and you know, I think where I've been able to go with it, and to be able to be a practicing orthopedic surgeon, but to also be able to work with physicians in every silo of medicine, whether it's nephrology, oncology, hematology, pulmonology, cardiovascular, neurology, neurosurgery. It's because it all comes back to the cell.
Yeah.
And I'm just fortunate enough to have a lot of contacts in the research side of the bench work of a lot of where people are with looking at where the cellular these cellular pathways are so important in disease processes, and how it's all leading to this concept of cellular senescence. And that's kind of the crux of my book that I put out, that really is
Where is it?
really
Here somewhere.
oh, that's okay. You know, that's, thank you for, but it's all about this concept that, you know what, that all silos of medicine do come down to the cell. And if you understand the cell and you understand the mechanisms of how the cell makes decisions, then it's like speaking a language that you can speak within any specialty, and with all of the scientists together.
Yeah.
And I'm just fortunate that I can work in all those different silos and have some input in trying to improve the care of patients with any of those significant issues, that because it all again comes back to the cell. So in essence, yes, I do all those things, and it's a never-ending day for me to continue to try to learn more and to help my patients. So that's what I do.
That's amazing. Well, it's interesting, you know, that whole idea of cellular medicine being the common denominator that goes across, whether it's treating illness or moving people from where they are to a state of optimization, like of regenerative medicine, turning back the clock, slowing down the clock, healthy aging, whatever we want to call it, kind of thing. It's that one language, which I guess is what goes across all these different disciplines of medicine. And so one of the projects that you've recently been involved with is this amazing event that's happening on November 14th. So before we launch into the nitty gritty of the peptides we're going to talk about tonight, and this one, maybe we'll explore one topic around cellular medicine that I know that you're very passionate about, and that's really up and coming right now. Could we talk a little bit about this event on November 14th? Because it has a really cool connection to peptides, which I think a lot of people don't realize. And so maybe we could talk about that just for a couple of minutes.
Sure. We've teamed up with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society for an event November the 14th, where we are doing a one-day seminar with, I believe I might have about 10 of my fellows that are going to be presenting specific topics related to peptides, and the focus is in small molecules, but the focus is to show the relevance in why cell efficiency and metabolic flexibility and all of these issues with senescence have everything to do with why we have issues with cancer, and to show and to bring to light the importance of some of the leading leading research in oncology specifically, and lymphoma and leukemia, are focused around peptide therapies, or peptide therapies in combination with other therapies, which are looking like they are the leading edge of where we're going in this world of trying to improve these situations, and if not, try to cure them. And
Amazing.
And this is a tremendous partnership, because we there's just too much, people aren't aware that these type of research projects are going on all over the world. And I'm fortunate to have numerous contacts with a lot of bench work that's going on everywhere. And in particular, this was a field that is a very strong group in the world in raising money to direct it directly towards programs like this, or specific research projects like specific peptides that are up and coming, and in getting them all the way through the process of where they're an idea and then they become a treatment option.
Wow.
And they've done a tremendous job this society has put over I think I want to say over 50 some therapies forward over their time frame in pushing the envelope of getting things available that people didn't have available before. And
Amazing.
we felt that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us to get together, highlight what they're doing, what we know about that, and highlight the issues of how important the cell is and the mechanisms there are that we are aware of of keeping the cell in efficient state, and kind of giving people an inside look at the possibilities of, there are ways, if you look at this in the right framework, we're trying to give people ways of preventing problems.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this all leads back to the cell and what can go wrong with the cell. And so highlighting this with the most current research that I think is just fascinating work going on right now, because the real important thing here is what most people don't realize is that these things that happen in oncology, they trickle down into all parts of medicine and life,
Right.
of where people have other opportunities to use these peptides or molecules for other ailments that are even more significant. And that is really, really important for people to understand. And so this is a tremendous opportunity for us, especially with them wanting to work with our society in understanding that we're here to educate, and we're here to show the benefits of what's really happening out there in the world of research and treatment protocols that are coming down the pike to change people's lives with understanding pathways and mechanisms of the cell, in particular using specific peptides to reach those goals. And the more information we can empower people with and give them the right connotation of the use of these signaling agents and how important it is in the future of medicine, then we're doing a great job of pushing messages forward to everybody in the world, and including our colleagues that are just as interested. And so that's kind of that's the lead into just a tremendous partnership. And what's so humbling is we announced this in my last mastermind, a teaching event that I do about every quarter, and then some other things in between. But when we announced this to our base, within, I want to say within a day and a half, we had over $36,000 donated to this. It was unbelievable.
I was there. I actually think it was within 20 minutes.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Like, I mean, I was there online. I think it happened. Like, it was amazing. The response that you got from your community in that room was actually overwhelming. It was.
Yeah. Well, it just shows you, these are doctors also that are committed to we're doing this for this is the SSRP. We're doing this entire lecture that day for all doctors, but also for the public.
So that's the thing. So how can people take part in this? It's maybe what we can do is we can just give them a URL that they can go to. And I think people can sign up. They can attend the information sessions through the day that are being offered by your fellows.
Yes.
What would be the URL people would go to? And I can put it in the show notes as well if you don't know it off the top of your head. Although I'm guessing you probably do.
So I'm like the wrong person to ever ask about anything, like even getting onto this site here, right?
You did fine. So what's the name of the event?
It's Light the Night. It's Light the Night with the LLS, with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, with SSRP Light the Night.
Okay.
And I'm sure Karen will get you a link, and it's what we're doing is it's really like a donate as you want. You don't even have to donate. You can just show up, but if you want to donate $1 or 50 cents or whatever to this cause, we would love to have you, because I think this is a real opportunity all the way around for us to showcase some amazing things going on in oncology, and also to showcase the amazing things about the cell, and showcase some pretty smart doctors around the globe here that are involved. We have 10 top fellows that are going to be talking, that teach for me all over the US here. And so it's going to be really, I think, exciting just to be able to highlight my docs from around the United States here and outside the United States, and to make a great night of it for everyone. And it's just one of those things where this is the power of education. It's just, it's infectious, and we're just excited to have this relationship, and to bring to them this event where they're just as excited about being involved with us. So we're going to have a great time.
Amazing. Okay. Well, that sounds great. So now, to move us into our podcast, you mentioned something earlier that I think is a very hot topic these days, and people are all aflutter about it, trying to figure out what it really is. Is it bad? Is it good? How do we manage it? And that's about cellular senescence. It's that state of a cell, people try to make it more accessible, calling them zombie cells. So cells that almost kind of go into a dormant state, but it's not an innocuous dormant state. It's a state where the cell starts to actually become a bit of a bad actor in the system. And it's funny, I feel like in these communities of people that are kind of ahead of the curve a bit in health optimization, like biohackers and whatnot, automatically it's like, well, what are the supplements you can take, what are the peptides you can use to get rid of all of those senescent cells? And my take is, it's not that simple, and B, this is not the kind of thing you want to go at with a 2x4. It's a bit of a finesse thing. So maybe we could just spend a couple of minutes just explaining a little bit what we know, that these senescent cells, or certainly anybody who spent any time with your book knows that cellular senescence has a ton to do with the aging process. It has a lot to do with every disease process. So maybe talking a little bit about senescent cells. Do we know that what can we do about them? Should we be doing anything about them? That's it. I don't want to ask too many questions, because otherwise we won't get to the peptides, but that's...
Does that mean Dr. Seeds keep it short and sweet? Is that exactly?
Let's you and I keep it short, because listen, I could keep asking questions till the cows come home. So,
well, I think the concept is, let me just take you through a little path of what is cell senescence, and basically I think cell senescence is good and cell senescence is bad.
Right.
And we need cell senescence. And senescence basically means when a cell, it stops replicating. It stops in its cell cycle, and it holds itself in a place of where it doesn't replicate anymore, and it can get bigger in size, and it can start producing more cytokines and chemokines and proteases, which are just basically signaling agents that can be, let's term them pro-inflammatory. They can be things that are not good.
Right. But would they be things that might draw attention to an area in the body that needs attention in a way? Like, is that in a sense maybe a purpose of a senescent cell that's not so bad?
So absolutely. So we need senescent cells when we're going through growth, when we're going through embryogenesis, when we're an embryo and we're going through all the stages of growth. We need stages of where things need to stop and shut down as we grow. And so cell senescence is very important in that part of our life. We also need cell senescence when we have injury, when we have an open wound, when we have healing, because processes need to stop, and senescent cells in a way play a role in taking care of injury.
Okay.
And so we need senescent cells because they can signal other cells to help them stop certain processes that don't go overboard,
Okay.
basically. But we also can produce senescent cells that can be that where you'll have a normal cell. So let's just talk about senescence real quickly and saying we have a normal cell that is doing its job, living its life, doing well, and all of a sudden maybe it gets an insult of stress or a virus or bacteria, and then it has to work a little harder to kind of work against that.
Yep.
It produces some of these signaling agents to help change the cell to fight things off. And in fact, some of those changes may alter the DNA a little bit, where the DNA has to repair in that cell. And so the cell will kind of say to itself, all right, let me stop in my rotation of my cell cycle and let me evaluate how I can get myself out of this problem. And it has a bunch of ways that it can go in doing that. And that's where you hear these terms like autophagy and mitophagy and apoptosis and ferroptosis and necrosis, all these things. Basically, that cell says, okay, what can I do at this point in time? Can I fix myself? If I can, I get those things done, and then I go back into the cell cycle and I'm good to go. If I can't, well, then I say to myself, all right, I'm going to send off some signals to my immune system and say, immune system, come on in, I'm done, get me out of here, or else I'm going to be a problem. And so the immune system comes in and it helps remove that cell, or the cell has its own signaling of where it can non-immunogenetically, it goes through apoptosis, a normal cycle where it disintegrates basically, and then the immune system comes in and engulfs everything and gets rid of it.
Right.
But let's say that cell is not capable of controlling that messaging, and all of a sudden it can't send the right signals, and it stops its cell cycle, and then it starts producing these signaling agents that are bad for other cells.
Right.
Then it becomes a player of a problem, because now the immune system can't come in and recognize it as a bad cell because it camouflages itself. And the immune system doesn't see it as a bad cell. And so it gets to sit around and constantly send bad signals to other good cells.
Right.
And so depending on where those senescent cells hang out, in the brain, in the heart, in the gut, this is how you start to get different disease processes, or in the pancreas, around beta cells, so you can get insulin problems. I mean, it really comes down to this story of senescent cells creating issues for cell repair,
Yeah.
other good cells that it converts, and or converting a cell into a cancerous cell, where we call it oncogenic induced senescence. So there's lots of different senescence phenotypes, which are just different types of cells, but it's what it can lead to cancer and cause cancer type of cells. And what's really interesting, now here's the kicker. So we're talking about how senescent cells are bad and how they can create problems and they can create cancer. But when you have a cancerous cell goes back into its cell cycle and it replicates and becomes a problem.
Right.
But it's producing bad stuff.
Yeah.
Those cells, we would like them to go back into senescence.
Right.
So then we can attack them. And that's where research is going these days, now that we're getting an understanding of senescence. And I just put about 300 papers together for you right there in 5 minutes of telling you what senescence is, because it's the hottest thing in medicine right now. and
Wow.
in research. It's it. And there's so many players involved. But the beauty of it is, if you understand the cell and you understand how these things can happen, how a cell can make those decisions in becoming a senescent cell, well, then that's where you start working upstream to prevent that process.
Right.
So everybody's focused on going after all of this senescence by hitting it with bazookas, and the problem is you need senescent cells. So you have to be very, very careful about what you're trying to wipe out, because you can make some really stupid mistakes. And unfortunately, I think that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
don't think enough. I don't think people are paying attention to the importance of what we need, versus letting the intelligence of our body figure out how to. You just need to give you need to give your immune system the capability of recognizing these senescent cells again, so then your immune system can work with some other tumor suppressors like tumor suppressor P53 and so forth, where they can work together to do what they know how to do, and that's how to deal with senescence, because we're not capable of that. And that is I believe the key to disease, cancer, everything all together is, again, it's giving the right signaling to the body, to the immune system side and the cell efficiency and so forth, so they can work together to work in modulating senescence, in being senolytic, like the immune system coming in and taking things out.
yeah.
And but going way ahead of that and working on let's work on the efficiency of the cell so it has better choices, so it doesn't choose that senescence pathway. So,
Right.
and that's what we're all about in cellular medicine. It's focusing on those issues, and that's really where the power of peptides come into play, because there's
Yeah.
so many places that, depending on where you're at in working against senescence, you've got many avenues to work on modulation, senomodulation, senolytic, and other senotherapies together, that can be, I believe, can be very powerful over time. And so that's kind of an overview again of it's a simplistic overview, but I'll tell you what, it's really all you need to understand and to start reading on your own, and
Yeah.
understand a tremendous amount, I think, of what's happening in the world of
So when
of-
so when people talk about senolytics, right? So let's talk about that. So senolytics, there's metformin is a senolytic, is it?
well, it's more of a senomodulator. Again,
Okay.
it's
So we're getting into the modulation aspect here. Again, we're talking about toggling and allowing the immune system, or whatever process it is, allowing the wisdom of the body to really kick in here. In essence,
yeah,
is what we're trying to do.
so a senescent cell is basically, we kind of look at it as a cell in a very high mTOR state.
Yeah.
You have AMPK and you have mTOR. AMPK is catabolic, mTOR is anabolic.
Yeah.
And these cells, senescent cells, are always in an mTOR state. And metformin does something to stop that mTOR state, basically, and it upregulates an NFR2 mechanism, and it does a little bit in a cytochrome 1 of the oxidative phosphorylation chain to kind of, it's a rob Peter to pay Paul kind of deal, where it tricks the mitochondria into making more energy and being more AMPK activated, and that way it turns on a little more autophagy, and so it turns off mTOR, so it gives the cell some ability to clean up, and so that it's trying to modulate that process while it controls mTOR, and it's got, I mean, and I really got to be careful about talking about metformin, because it's got it's got some really interesting qualities, but you got to be careful with how you use it, and it may not be the ideal thing to use all the time, just for many reasons. And but it's actually it's one of the more hotter research small molecules in medicine right now. So
yeah, well, definitely the arguments on metformin are ongoing. It's good, it's bad, and I guess it's somewhere in the middle, in that in some cases, used properly, it's probably good. But
it has its place, and you just got to know when to use it. And I think people have to be very careful using it as a prophylactic for trying to prevent or increase longevity in life. And you got to be really, really careful, because I'm just one of those advocates of, okay, I understand robbing Peter to pay Paul to do something to upregulate the mitochondria in a way for maybe a short period of time, or to do something to stimulate the mitochondria in a way that can work. But as a long-term treatment or a protocol for a cell efficiency side of things, I'd have to disagree with that. And because I'm all about efficiency, and yet if it doesn't make sense critically to you, there's got to be something that's not right there. And what it comes down to is the thermodynamics of the NAD and NADH, NADPH, and NADP, and the ATP, and the coenzyme A, coenzyme, and those, and ADP, ATP, those type of things are altered and in the wrong way.
Right.
So, but again, if you know how to use it, it can be a great player in certain mechanisms of what you're treating for periods of time.
Yeah.
And the other thing people forget is it can, it has all the opportunity to create a hypoglycemic state for people if you're using it in higher doses, and you got to really be cognizant of that. But otherwise, I mean, there's lots of people who could debate me with that and would tell you that it's their number one aging molecule, and I would just say, you know what, you got to, what's my number one aging molecule? It's diet and exercise.
I was gonna say, if you can help the body do it for itself, it's
right.
And the body can do it, like through fasting and feasting, like doing this diet modulation, the right exercise at the right time. It is amazing to me that sometimes in the anti-aging space, it looks like we're always looking for a shortcut. We're always looking for the magic bullet, when if you really think about it, if it comes down to it, I mean, unless you've got a very advanced disease state or whatever the case may be, these interventions won't be enough. And that's maybe when you got to call in the big guns. But for those of us who are still in a fairly healthy, balanced state, there's not much, and maybe with a couple of peptides here and there to help along the way on occasion, I don't think there's much that you can't go at with sleep, the right light at the right time, the nutrition modulation, the right exercise without having to run a marathon every day so that you're not breaking down faster than you can rebuild. Like that whole story, it's kind of boring, but it stays the same.
Well, and you're absolutely right, Natalie. And I think, I'm always that person who I'm going to say, your audience is smart out there. And when you listen to people, look and see if these people are truly walking the talk, and if they can represent what they're saying, because it doesn't make any sense to me that people are up there lecturing and talking about things that don't even look like they represent what they're talking about. I mean, that to me is an automatic. You're done. I'm not. You've lost my credibility. Your credibility to me. So I think that's number one in the diet and exercise part of that, and that makes sense. But we also know. So take that. Let's take that a little further, because I think this is really important. So exercise and diet are cynomodulators. Dieting or fasting is something that's going to shut down mTOR. It's going to raise AMPK. It's going to do those things that improve autophagy, mitophagy. So it's a modulator, and it's working on improving efficiency. Just like aerobic exercise and resistance exercise all have their places in those processes of turning on and off mTOR and AMPK. But you have to, you got to have that balance. I mean, it's a seesaw, but you want the balance. You don't want one tip too far and one tip the other. So when I say walk that talk, you can have people that are overdoing it also, that are way overdoing the nutritional part, are way overdoing the exercise part. And then they put themselves in a state of where possibly they look like they're in fantastic shape, but really inside they're an oxidative mess.
Yeah.
And that's because they haven't given themselves, and they're increasing the number of senescent cells because they've lost that oxidative advantage of creating antioxidants that they can create to deal with those oxidative states that they're making. You know, when we work out and we exercise, we create oxidative states, nitrosative and oxidative states in the body. So you've got to be able to produce the antioxidants to deal with that. And so if you're not, and you're overdoing it, you're going to lose the game there. And that's how you get these people in trouble. This is how athletes get into constant upper respiratory infections and all kinds of issues where they think, how could this be? I'm the healthiest person around. And yet, no, they're not. And then it's on that other side where people are taking every supplement known to mankind, and they don't realize that that is reducing these oxidative signaling agents that they need to function.
Yeah.
And they're overdoing it, and that sets them into a horrible cycle of producing senescent cells. So again, it's a balance, and that's what it comes down to, I think.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's a message that's worth repeating over and over again, because, you know, sometimes I think it comes down to, it's not what you're taking, it's what you're not taking. It's not what you're doing. It's sometimes you have to take things away rather than always adding more and more to the plate and just getting out of the way of the body. But we're going to talk about, we have to talk about a peptide or two before you have to take off. So on the list today, and I don't think we're going to get to talk about all three, because I think, well, I mean, truthfully, under any circumstances, you could talk for days about any peptide. But I think that I'm trying to decide between these three peptides, which one we should talk about. And I think the ones I'd love to touch on a little bit, and are these two peptides called SELANK and CMAX, or SELANK and CMAX. I don't know how to pronounce them properly. English is a second language here. And both of them are considered, really, people think of these peptides as brain peptides, right? But what and we can talk about that a little bit, but what I find really interesting is the other effects that they both have. They both seem to have effect on the gut. Which makes sense because we have a brain in the gut, but on gut healing and anti-ulcer, and both of them I read have anticoagulant properties. And so how strong are these other effects? Because for the most part, people are taking them to maybe hoping to manage anxiety or improving cognitive function. But they should know about these other properties, because let's say you've got a coagulation issue. Maybe you're on anticoagulants, and yet this peptide might augment the effect of your anticoagulants. So how pronounced are these effects, and do they happen at regular doses or?
Sure. Well, again, okay, so we're talking about smaller peptides. These are regulatory peptides like SELANK and CMAX, and if let's pull SELANK out of that and just we look at SELANK, and SELANK is, and these typically are two peptides that can be used subcutaneously or intranasally.
Yeah.
And I find that the intranasal usage of these smaller peptides because they're small, and they can get through into the cell, and you don't have to have the dosing that doesn't have to be significant to utilize the effects of these peptides. But in particular, if we look at SELANK, and in with it's got a lot of variability because it represents something called tufsin, which is another molecule that is similar to the IgG immunoglobulin,
Yeah.
the fragment, and so it has immune properties that are similar to that fragment, and in particular, it has immune properties against influenza or certain viruses. So giving it intranasal has a couple advantages because it can sit there in that upper respiratory area of the nasal pharynx where you are inoculated with in particular with upper respiratory viruses. Hence some of the things that we're dealing with now. And it definitely has proven effects against some of these upper respiratory viruses. In particular, what it can act in itself as something that binds to the virus itself, and then it has these other properties of because of the SELANK molecule can actually it fragments into two different molecules, like a tripeptide that's a regular peptide in dealing with making the cell produce more anti-inflammatory type of cytokines, in particular like interleukin 10.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing when it comes to working against pro-inflammatory states, because interleukin 10 has the ability to help modulate the immune system, where it can turn macrophages, it can phase change macrophages into anti-inflammatory type of cells. It can work on microglial cells and change those microglial cells into good microglial cells.
So that's kind of the neuroprotective aspect.
It's neuroprotective, but it can also, interleukin 10 and decreasing tumor necrosis factor alpha and working on interleukin 6 can also have great effects on the gut in managing the pro-inflammatory states that can be activated by a change in the microbiome and that are active around ulcers. That's why you brought up ulcers. It also has the ability to increase brain-derived neurotropic factor, which
always a
is
good thing.
Absolutely, because that has it has significant influence with people that have issues with depression and any really issues with neurotransmitters. Always improving brain-derived neurotropic factor is a positive in improving those states of anxiety. It's an anxiolytic. That's why I really like SELANK as an intranasal peptide, because it's as an introductory type of peptide. Depending on why you're using it, it has such a great utility of so many things that you can do, and where, especially when you may have a patient that's opposed to any type of injections, and you're trying to accomplish a lot of things at once, and that's working on the immune system, working on a prophylaxis type of thing for upper respiratory infections, working on anxiety at the same time, because most people in these states are having anxiety issues or some subclinical depression, and by just one peptide, you can work on a multitude of issues and with very, very, very minimal, if any, side effects at all. And that's why I really like SELANK.
I'm in love with it now. So when you're getting all these different effects, obviously the prophylactic effect, the antiviral, I guess antiviral for lack of a better term, that would be on the intranasal, particularly on the intranasal administration.
Yes.
But for the subcutaneous administration, would you still get the brain effects, or to a lesser degree? Like it seems like the intranasal gives you kind of like a beeline to the brain in a sense, although it's still getting absorbed into the vascular system. But
yeah, it's still
would you use it differently for different benefits?
So I'm going to tell you, it's just as effective sub-Q as getting across the blood-brain barrier and still having those anoxylytic effects and having the brain drive neurotrophic factor effects. And I will tell you, it can be very patient dependent sometimes. Some people respond well to, most people respond well to the nasal. And I've had people that I've used the injectable that maybe I didn't feel I was getting the effects I wanted to with the intranasal, and I used sub-Q, and I found that I got dramatic change just from that. So
amazing.
Again, it's working with the patient, and in trying to, depending on what you're looking for and what you're trying to work with, in improving that. I think I think you'll see more. I think you're going to see more dramatic changes in working with people that are having issues with cell efficiency versus let's say you've got someone who's very relatively healthy and is just trying to use SELANK, let's say, as a nootropic. And I don't think, I think it can be utilized that way, because it still can work as an anoxylytic. It definitely will help in that fashion. But then again, this gets into my spiel about people using these neuropeptides. They've got to understand that you just can't take a neuropeptide and just think that your brain's going to just get better with increased neuroplasticity because you're doing something. You got to stimulate the brain. You got to work on it. You got to work on it just like you work out. You got to do something a little different, or you got to take a different approach in how you're learning to get the most out of any of these neuropeptides, whether it's SELANK, CMAX, or cerebrolysine, or dihexa, or FGLL, or
yeah, I remember one of the fellows in the last mastermind saying that it may have been SELANK, or it may be another one of these peptides, that she said when she gives it to a patient, particularly I guess someone who's more optimized, she's like, she wants to make sure that they're either going to learn a new language or learn to play an instrument. Like they're actually going for this period of time, whether it's a 4 to 6 week run, actually take on a new task, so that, to your point, you're stimulating the change in the brain, and that the peptide is there to kind of help with that neuroplasticity, which is a really fascinating concept if you think about it.
Well, it has to be. I mean, if you're, it has its place, and absolutely it can be very effective with people that are having, it's more and more dramatically in older patients who are having those anxious issues and having subclinical depression, where just a little bit of increase of brain-derived neurotrophic factor can make a significant difference. And we won't go down that line in the literature, but that's where everything is going right now, with understanding that, boy, maybe we don't have this right about why people are getting into these states. It has to do more with these neurotropic factors and what we're losing. Well, that's certainly true. But who you're talking about is Suzanne Turner, Dr. Turner out of Atlanta, who's one of my top fellows. And she is absolutely correct in, you're giving this system the ability to start building, and you're laying down the tracks, and to lay those tracks down, you've got to have something stimulating those tracks. They got to have a reason to want to do that and use that brain-derived neurotrophic factor and other factors and signaling agents, chemokines and proteases and cytokines that are there to make that all happen with dendritic arborization and synapses of neurons and you know, the synaptoplasticity we talk about, and
Yeah.
it all has to, you have to have something stimulating that.
It's like I'm just thinking it's kind of like delivering a bunch of building materials to a building site, dropping them off and then saying, all right, and waiting for the building to come up. Like, you got to build the building. You got to have a destination kind of thing or a goal, and the brain will take it on and have more capacity to build and to grow and to do the things you want it to do by taking on these new tasks or whatever the case may be.
And then that's the important thing. It's got to be different. It's not like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to study and I'm going to get smarter. No, not that way. It's got to be something you do differently. It's got to, it's so easy to do that, right? It's so easy to sit down and just do things the way you did before. It's very hard to do things differently. And that's, I want to tell people, I think that's part of my success is I'm always looking at doing something a little different and thinking of something a little differently to get to the same end point.
Interesting.
And it's the hardest part is getting started, because you naturally just don't want to do it, and it's a fight.
Yeah.
And that never ever changes. It never gets better. It's a fight all the time. I'm my worst enemy, but I'm also my best friend if I know how to make it work.
Amazing.
So,
great. Okay, so the last thing on SELANK, and I think we're going to leave the other peptides for another day because we're a couple minutes over time and I want to be respectful of your time tonight. It says something in here about sleep-wake balance for SELANK. How does that happen? Like, I never would have thought of SELANK as something that has an influence on, and it was the wording you used was very specific. It was sleep-wake balance, not circadian rhythm, not. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because so many people struggle, right? They struggle with, they're sleepy during the day, they're awake during the night. Like we're all discombobulated. People are so discombobulated because of their lifestyles and all of the external influences in our world.
Sure. So it does. So you didn't, I left it more, I didn't want to expand. It gets into our next book, probably more significantly, but
Okay.
but it actually does have a part of that, of the overall circadian clock.
Okay.
It's all about balancing. It's about when the clock turns on and when the clock turns off, and you could think of SELANK as kind of another master switch that can help try to get the balance back. And it's why SELANK can be very, very, very helpful when you use it like with DSIP. You know, DSIP by itself, a delta sleep inducing peptide or deep sleep inducing peptide, is a peptide that's one of those things that we look at as physicians and say, you know, it's a 50-50 peptide if it's going to work. Mm-hmm. But when it works, it's an incredible peptide. Well, there are ways to make that peptide be very helpful if you have other ways of working with circadian rhythms. And that has to do with, like, my first mastermind. I spent a lot of time on that. But this is another mechanism of trying to write that clock,
right,
that is so important in all cell signaling. And and I think it's better to just leave it at that instead of getting people confused. But that's really, it's like a super set. It's just like a super switch. And like, if I find, let's say I have someone that I'm working on with DSIP and I'm not getting to where I want to be, and I thought it was going to be, you know, I didn't foresee it being an issue, I might pull SELANK into the game there, and back off the DSIP for a while and just use SELANK because it's got so many ways it can work for me, and
Yeah.
also that just consider it that master switch again. And then I go back to the DSIP, and sometimes I don't even have to go there. And I can work that sleep wake cycle becomes better controlled. Uh,
Interesting. Interesting.
and it has a little bit with about like calming the brain, where you're setting up the brain with its ability to make it. It's improving the serotonergic pathway, serotonergic, meaning you're gonna be more efficient making serotonin. Serotonin makes melatonin. Melatonin is very helpful in turning off the circadian clock and dampening down the brain and allowing you to sleep. So I just kind of gave you a little hint into that whole process, but that's what you're working with, basically, and trying to you're trying to control also this thing called tryptophan metabolism that
Yeah.
actually controls everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by controlling interleukin 10, or improving interleukin 10, you have a way of dampening down the potential of how tryptophan metabolism can go awry and have an effect on the serotonergic, dopaminergic, endorphinergic, and nitric oxide. It can have an effect on all of these neurotransmitters. And so that's kind of a short answer for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and it is the magic of these peptides, right? Is how, and that, the more, I mean, I'm still a newbie at it, but the more I learn about it, the more what's amazing to me is how they act as these small molecules that just kind of flip little switches here and there and start these cascades of processes that are interconnected. And it's really, what's amazing is that, it's not as simple as saying, oh, this peptide's going to do this one thing, because what it's doing, to your point, it's acting at this cellular level way upstream. And there's never one pathway that comes from one place. It's like a multitude of pathways. And so it's that whole pleiotropic thing that's going on that I mean, it's just so fascinating. And I don't know, it's so exciting to even be in this space, honestly. It's just
I love all your words. I love it.
I use a lot of words. Okay, well, you know what? I think we're going to leave it at SELANK for tonight, because we've talked about lots of amazing things. We've talked about the big event on November 14th. So I will put the link to that event in the show notes. There's also, we talked a little bit about the SSRP Mastermind and how this is giving rise. And I mean, it's getting to be the fly on the wall on the mastermind, as I was that weekend, a couple of weeks ago. It was just so amazing to see this room full of physicians kind of working together, brainstorming. Some of the case studies that got shared at the end are just like, it's all so inspiring, right? So I just, I do love I just love the work that you do. I mean, it's so amazing. And we recorded another podcast before this one that we decided not to share just yet. And in that one, you said something. Oh, I'm trying to remember what it was. I don't know. Oh, I know what you said. You said, I asked you about peptides, what if you think that the impact it's going to have on conventional medicine, and you said at the time that in your mind it's going to revolutionize the way people practice medicine over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's not hard to imagine how that could really happen, if not sooner, assuming people are willing to adopt it, which I guess is your job.
Yeah, I believe that is going to be it's going to be an enlightening time, I think, for, you can't get around outcomes, and you can't get around
Mm-hmm.
you can't get around changing processes that we haven't been able to change before, that are now changed, that now we have ways of getting to places we didn't, or we weren't capable of. And that's a humbling experience to be part of that. And it's just the beginning. So I thank you for having me. I do want to give you a little, so because this is going to go out a little bit later, I know I can announce this, but I have a really, probably one of my, if it isn't going to be my most favorite thing I do, I'm going to be putting on a performance talk. That it's going to be a 2-day talk that's coming up in early December that everybody's going to be able to come to. We're not going to just keep it to doctors.
Yeah.
It's going to be wide open, and it's about optimizing performance, whether it's the brain, the body, and it's one of my favorite topics, and it's a lot of fun, and you might have heard about it if you were there. I'm doing a thing for my fellows where I'm bringing all my fellows out to my top fellows out to Vail, and I'm doing this for them. It's a course.
That's amazing.
For them.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna let other people. We're gonna make it live, that other people are, if they want to be part of it, they'll have to purchase it, but they'll be allowed to be part of it. So
that's so exciting. Yeah. So when will that, I guess we'll share that information. I mean, we found each other mainly through the Facebook group that I run, the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Group. I'll be announcing it there. We'll be sharing it out any way that we can. I'll put it in the show notes if we have the information in time for the show notes. But that sure sounds like an amazing event for sure.
I'm sure Karen will tell you, but I just don't want to take light off the LLS stuff. I mean, that's our big deal. Yeah. So.
Okay. So then we'll be announcing the details for this November 14th. First week of November 14th, then we do that. So Dr. Seeds, thank you so much for tonight. I really appreciate your time. This has been a fabulous discussion.
Always.
And I hope we get to have you back again so that we can talk about CMAX and cerebral lysin and all the other peptides.
I'm always here for you. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye, Natalie.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Show. Remember that you can connect with me on Facebook in the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Group, or you can find me on my website, which is Niddam. It's a new website, NATNIDDAM, natniddam.com. And you can contact me directly through the website if you like, or, well, like I said, Facebook. And if you're not a Facebook person, I actually have another group on another platform called MeWe, and it's called Biohacking for Longevity. You can join there. It's not quite as big a group as the Facebook group, but we're working on moving people over slowly but surely. So hope to see you somewhere in one of those places. Thanks again. And remember, please leave us a review and a 5-star rating if you enjoyed the episode. Thanks so much.